Rain poured heavily over the glass city skyline of New York as Aria Bennett stood inside her father's old office. Her trembling hands clutching a single sheet of paper that was about to change her life forever. The smell of ink and old wood filled the room, but all she could focus on were the words written in bold. Marriage agreement between Aria Bennett and Dominic Blackwell. Her father's voice, weak but desperate, echoed in her ears. "It's the only way, Aria. They'll take everything if we don't." She wanted to scream, to say that she didn't care about the debts or the family name. But when she turned and saw her mother silently crying in the corner, Aria swallowed every word rising in her throat. She knew this wasn't just about money. It was about survival. Dominic Blackwell. The name alone carried weight in every powerful circle in America. A self-made billionaire who had built his empire from nothing, floor by floor, deal by ruthless deal. Feared by competitors and avoided by the press, they called him the Iron Heart of Wall Street. No one crossed him. No one got close enough to try. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, and sharp-jawed, the kind of man who filled a room without raising his voice. Aria had seen him once in a news photograph. He hadn't been smiling. His eyes, dark, steady, already decided, had looked like they belonged to a man who had never once doubted a choice he made. And now, without ever having spoken a single word to her, he had chosen her. Not out of love. Out of convenience. She was 23. Fresh out of college. Still dreaming of becoming a writer, of telling stories about people who chose love freely, without conditions or contracts. But dreams meant nothing when your family was drowning. Dominic had offered to erase every debt, every threat, every sleepless night in exchange for 1 year as his wife. A transaction dressed in a wedding ring. Aria looked at her mother's shaking shoulders one more time. Then she picked up the pen. And she signed her name. Outside, the rain did not stop. It fell harder, as if the city itself knew what she had just given away. The black car arrived exactly at midnight. Aria stepped inside without a word, her small bag pressed against her lap as Manhattan blurred past the rain-streaked window. The city lights smeared into long gold ribbons in the dark. She watched them and tried not to think about what she was walking toward. When the car stopped, she looked up. The building was the kind that didn't need a sign. It simply rose, glass and steel, cold and certain above everything around it. Just like him. His penthouse was worse than she had imagined. Cold marble floors stretched in every direction. Silver decor. Clean lines. No warmth, no clutter, no sign that any living person had ever laughed inside these walls. It felt less like a home and more like a warning dressed in luxury. Dominic stood at the far end of the hall, still in his dark suit, jacket unbuttoned at the collar. He didn't move toward her. He simply watched her arrive, powerful, unreadable, and completely unmoved. "You understand the agreement," he said. It wasn't a question. 1 year. Public appearances when required. No interference in his personal affairs. In return, every debt attached to the Bennett name erased. "Yes," she whispered. He nodded once. "The wedding is tomorrow morning." The ceremony lasted 11 minutes. A courthouse on a gray Tuesday. Aria wore an elegant white dress that nobody had chosen for her. There were no flowers, no family, no music. Just a judge, 2 witnesses she had never met, and a man who stood beside her like a stranger at a bus stop. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Dominic did not look at her once. Not once. Life in the penthouse began the way most painful things do, in silence. Aria learned the shape of her new world quietly, moving through its rooms like a guest afraid to leave fingerprints. Everything was curated, cold, and untouched. The kind of space that had been designed to impress rather than to hold anyone. She ran her fingers along the marble countertops, the silver frames, the perfectly placed furniture that no one ever seemed to sit in. But then she started to notice the cracks in the perfection. A forgotten novel wedged on a high shelf, its spine soft with old use. A photograph tucked almost completely behind a vase as a younger Dominic, unguarded, almost smiling, standing somewhere that wasn't New York. An old record player sitting in the corner of the study was like something that had survived from a different life entirely, one that predated the marble floors and the iron reputation. Dominic wasn't empty, she realized. He was sealed. She stopped trying to understand him and simply began to live. She made coffee each morning the same way, slowly, deliberately, the smell of vanilla drifting through the kitchen like something that didn't belong in his world but refused to apologize for it. She laughed softly at old films on quiet evenings. She stood on the rain-wet balcony for long stretches, watching the city breathe below her, losing herself in the kind of silence that felt almost like writing. She didn't know he watched her. He always looked away before she could turn around. He told himself it meant nothing. Her stillness, her warmth, the way she made the penthouse feel occupied for the first time in years. He pushed it down. He was very good at that. The charity event was everything Aria had been warned to expect: chandeliers, cameras, and a room full of people performing versions of themselves for each other. She wore her elegant red gown and stood beside Dominic like she had practiced, close enough to be convincing, distant enough to feel the space between them. She was doing fine until the reporter found her. The woman appeared from nowhere, recorder raised, smile sharp and professional. The cameras swung toward Aria like searchlights. Around them, the room seemed to slow. "Mrs. Blackwell, do you love your husband?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. Aria felt the ripples move through her chest, her throat, her fingertips. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Then she felt it in her hand. Warm, steady, and certain, pressing gently against the small of her back. Dominic's voice came from just beside her ear, calm and unhurried, as if the question had been the easiest one in the room. "Of course she does." The reporters moved on. The cameras turned elsewhere. The moment dissolved into the noise of the evening as if it had never happened. But Aria felt it still, the warmth of his hand, the quiet weight of those 4 words. In the car on the way home, rain tracing its familiar lines down the dark window, she finally spoke. "You didn't have to say that." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the blurred city lights outside. "I know," he said. "But I wanted to." She turned to look at him. He turned at the same moment. For the first time, their eyes really met. He looked away first. She smelled it before she saw it. Aria padded into the kitchen that morning, still half asleep, dark hair loose around her shoulders, and stopped. A cup sat waiting on the counter, perfectly placed, still steaming. Beside it, a folded note in handwriting that was precise and unhurried, like everything about him. "You mentioned you like vanilla. D." She stared at it for a moment longer than necessary. Then she smiled quickly and unguarded, the kind that arrives before you can decide whether to allow it. It was such a small thing. That was exactly why it undid her. The conversations that followed came slowly, the way cautious things always do. They started with nothing: the weather, the news, a comment about the coffee. Then gradually, without either of them announcing it, they became something else. Real. Unscripted. The awkward pauses grew shorter. The silences between words stopped feeling like walls. One evening she found him at his desk long past dark, surrounded by the quiet architecture of his work, and she leaned in the doorway. "Do you ever take a day off?" He looked up. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, but close. The closest she had seen. "Days off are expensive." She tilted her head. "So is losing your soul." He said nothing. But he closed the laptop. Later that night they stood together on the balcony, the city spread below them like a scattered handful of light, rain-washed and glittering. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them reached for something to fill the silence. For the first time since she had arrived, the quiet between them felt like peace. Not distance. Peace. It started with a single headline. By morning it had become a flood. "Billionaire Dominic Blackwell in secret marriage. Who is Aria Bennett?" The words were everywhere before she had finished her first cup of coffee. She watched her name get passed between strangers like something disposable, pulled apart, examined, discarded. By noon, Social media had already decided who she was. Gold digger. Nobody. A girl who had sold herself for a fortune and dressed it up as love. She put her phone face down and tried to breathe. By evening, she couldn't. The penthouse that had slowly, carefully begun to feel like something livable now pressed against her from every direction. She moved through it quietly, the way she had learned to move through his world carefully, without taking up too much space. She pulled her bag from the wardrobe, folded 2 things inside it, then stopped, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the floor for a long time. Then she stood up and walked to the elevator. The doors slid open. She stepped in, watched the floor numbers appear above her. The doors began to close. "Where are you going?" His voice came from the hallway. Low. Urgent. Not a command, something rawer than that. She looked at him through the narrowing gap, tears sitting dangerously close to the surface. "I was never supposed to belong here, Dominic." The doors stopped. He stepped forward and held them open with one hand, his jaw tight, his eyes searching her face. Then something in him gave way. "I didn't bring you here to hurt you," he said quietly. "I brought you here because I needed someone I could trust." The elevator doors stayed open. It happened during dinner. The kind of quiet evening that had become, without either of them naming it, something they both looked forward to. The city hummed beyond the glass. The food was warm. Aria had been mid-sentence, something small, something that had almost made him smile when the phone on the table lit up and a voice cut through the room like a blade drawn in the dark. "You can't ignore me forever, Dominic." Sharp. Polished. Cold. Aria watched it happen in real time. His jaw tightened. His eyes shifted not to the phone, not to her, but somewhere far away. Somewhere she didn't have access to. "This isn't a good time, Vanessa." He ended the call. Set the phone down. Said nothing. They finished dinner in silence. Later that night, he didn't come home. Aria sat by the giant window for hours, watching the rain move across the city in slow gray curtains. She didn't read. She didn't write. She just sat with the thing that had been quietly growing inside her chest for weeks and finally let herself feel how heavy it had become. She had fallen for him. Painfully, inconveniently, completely. He returned the next morning looking pale and hollowed out. He sat beside her on the couch without preamble, elbows on his knees, eyes on the floor. "Vanessa was my ex-fiancée," he said quietly. "She didn't take our marriage well." Aria kept her voice gentle. "Do you still love her?" He shook his head slowly. "No. I just don't know how to stop being angry at what she did." The weeks that followed were the quietest kind of beautiful. They shared breakfasts without agendas. Watched old black and white films late into the night, the penthouse lit only by the screen and the distant glow of the city. Some evenings Aria would read her writing aloud, not asking for his opinion, simply filling the silence with her words, and Dominic would sit across the room and listen in a way that felt different from how he listened to everything else. Still. Unguarded. Present. She learned him in pieces, the way you learn a language slowly, then all at once. He had grown up with nothing. A small apartment, an absent father, a mother who worked 2 jobs and never complained. He had taught himself piano as a boy, playing on a second-hand keyboard until ambition swallowed that part of him whole. Every wall he had ever built, she came to understand, had been paid for in something real. Something lost. He learned her too. She wrote stories about love and courage not because life had been easy, but because she believed stubbornly, quietly, that kindness was never a weakness. One night on the balcony, the city spread below them in its endless glitter, she said it gently but without flinching. "You built a life where everyone fears you, Dominic. But fear isn't love." He turned to her. Something moved behind his eyes, heavy, old, unresolved. "Love only ever destroyed me." She didn't argue. She didn't reach for him. She didn't leave either. She simply stayed. She knew something was wrong before he spoke. Dominic was standing at his desk when she entered, a printed report in his hands, his face arranged into the kind of stillness that she had learned to fear more than anger. He read to the end. Set the pages down. And then looked up at her. The disbelief was there, but only for a moment. What replaced it was worse. A slow, terrible recognition. The look of a man who had been here before and had always known, somewhere deep and defended, that he would end up here again. Tell me this isn't true. Confidential data. Leaked to rivals. Traced to an email registered under her name. It's not. Her voice cracked on the two words. Dominic, I didn't, please. You have to trust me. He turned away. Faced the window. The city beyond it offered nothing. I want to. His voice was low and fractured at its edges. But I don't know how. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. Aria stood in it for as long as she could. Then she walked to the bedroom, picked up her bag with steady hands, and moved toward the elevator without running. She would not run. She had done nothing wrong. The doors closed between them. On his side of them, Dominic didn't move. The report sat on the desk behind him. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass. He looked down at his hand at the ring still sitting on his finger, and said nothing at all. She didn't run. She fought. For 3 days she barely slept. She moved through access logs, email records, and server timestamps with the same quiet stubbornness she brought to everything, methodical, patient, refusing to stop. And slowly, buried beneath layers of forged headers and carefully timed entries, the trail revealed itself. Too deliberate to be coincidence. Too precise to be anything but one person's careful, calculated hand. Vanessa. Aria printed everything. Walked into Blackwell Corporation on a gray Tuesday morning, took the elevator to the top floor, and placed the documents on Dominic's desk without a single word. He read in silence. She watched his face move through the evidence page by page, line by line, until the color drained from it entirely, and what remained was something she had never seen on him before. Not control. Not distance. Shame. I was a fool, he said quietly. I let my fear destroy the only real thing I had. Aria's voice came out softer than she intended, and shakier. Maybe fear was never the problem. Maybe you just never learned how to love. She turned toward the door. Don't go. His voice stopped her raw and stripped of everything he had spent years constructing around himself. She had never heard him sound like that. Like a man with nothing left to hide behind. I spent my whole life putting up walls. And then you walked in and made me wish I hadn't built a single one. She stopped. Turned slowly. Looked at him standing in the rain-gray light, powerful, broken, and finally honest. Then fight for me, Dominic, she said. Not because of the contract. Because you want to. His answer was the beginning of everything.